On this episode, we'll discuss how to build a giving campaign that people believe in. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. I'm Kendall Connor, and I'm joined by my co-host here at the Ministry Brands team, and that is Jess Moore. How are you today, Jess?
Hey, Kendall. I'm doing good. We're recording on a Friday, which is always
I'm
so
telling you,
lovely.
yeah, these Friday recordings, I could get used to these. That
Yeah,
might have to be our new flow.
different
Bring in the
energy.
Yeah, we're going to bring that Friday feeling to the Wednesday release to this.
Right.
So for all of the listeners who are catching this on a Wednesday or any other day of the week, we're going to bring that Friday energy today. And so hopefully you'll feel that in our episode, huh?
Yep, absolutely. I'm also excited about our guest today.
I am too. We have someone who's going to be joining us for the very first time on our show. And it's not every day that we get to talk to someone from our Ministry Brands team. So I'm excited about that.
Me too. She's a good one.
So we're going to have the one and only Kristen Foster, who's going to be joining us today on our show. Let me tell you a little bit about her for all of our listeners out there, maybe if you haven't had the chance to connect with her before. Her bio says that after spending years serving in full-time ministry, she now has the privilege of serving the church in a new way as the manager of client adoption here at Ministry Brands. She says that she's passionate about helping churches to maximize the technology that supports their mission by creating experiences that educate, encourage, and bring the most joy to the ministries that she serves. I think that's really cool.
I love it.
Uh, she says her goal is simple: to help others feel supported, empowered, and equipped for success. If just from that bio, Jess, I think our listeners can tell that they're really going to love her. And being able to have this conversation today, I think is going to be a good one.
Yeah, and can confirm that she definitely brings joy among so many other wonderful things, but she's such a funny human, and this is going to be a great conversation.
I'm excited because we get to talk about something that, Jess, I know that you're passionate about, and that is
Yes.
generosity and being able to build a giving campaign that people really believe in, one that's going to
Mm,
stick with them, one that's going to be able to highlight the things that a ministry is doing. And so I feel like this is going to be relevant for any church who is trying to really put those giving practices into place, but maybe something strategic. Maybe it's going towards a building fund, or maybe it's going to a specific project. But I think any kind of giving campaign that a church is going through, today's conversation is going to be relevant to.
Absolutely. Whether you are starting to ramp up for year-end giving, which it sounds
Mm-hmm.
early, but I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of our churches are stepping into that headspace right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
regardless of the time of year, this will be a valuable conversation, but it is pretty timely. So yeah, hopefully you get so much out of this and a lot of tactical, practical application. So yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, before we jump into it, I want to encourage all of you listeners out there, be sure you hit that follow button. We want to make sure that you are subscribed wherever you are enjoying our show. We want to make sure that you stay in the loop as we have these conversations, whether we're talking about giving or, whatever it may be that's relevant to your ministry. All of these things can help you to go further faster. And so we want to make sure that you get all of these things being able to send to you and get delivered right to your inbox. So make sure that you're doing that. We want to make sure that you don't miss a thing. But
Mhm.
without further ado, let's welcome Kristen to the show. How are you today?
I'm so great. How are y'all?
Good.
Yeah, we're so thankful that you took some time to set aside on your Friday. We keep talking about this Friday feeling, but spending some time on a Friday talking with us.
Absolutely. This is the highlight of my day. I'm excited.
No.
Well, something that we ask, Kristen, for everyone who comes on the show is maybe we read the public bio, but maybe what's something that's not on that public bio that all your family and your friends would know about you?
Oh goodness. Let's see. One of the biggest things about me is that I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old toddler running around, keeping us on our toes. And my son is also on the spectrum. So he has autism. And so my husband and I are really big into autism awareness, acceptance, and inclusion. And so that's
Wow,
something that
yeah.
I'm personally really passionate about. So we try to be as involved as we can and use whatever platform we have to elevate the special needs community.
I love that
Wow, that's
so much.
incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. Jess and I are both parents, and so I can definitely relate to you on that. I've got 3 boys and 1 on the way. I don't think I've said that on the podcast
You
yet.
haven't.
But
Hey,
yeah, that's pretty
congratulations.
exciting, and yeah, thank you so much, and Jess, I know you've got a family too. Remind us, about your family. You have 2 kids, is that right?
I've got 2. They're teenagers. They're both taller than me, but they're nice. They're the nice kind of teenager, and
Oh,
they're really
that's
fun.
nice.
So they're actually
That's an
at
important distinction, I think.
yes, I agree. I mean, we still got time, but for right now, they're both still super fun and sweet, and they're at a church conference this week, and they're having a blast. So, yeah,
Very cool. All right, well, as we kind of jump into hearing more about how you've gotten involved in and how you've been involved in ministry, I'd love to hear just more about your story, Kristen. I believe you mentioned before that you have served in maybe kids ministry, worship ministry. Tell us all about that and kind of what led you to today.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my ministry journey in the worship ministry space, and so in college, I was studying voice performance. I was certain I was gonna be an opera singer, for whatever reason, and, I really enjoyed it, but, I just felt the Lord calling me into, ministry and using my gifts and talents to serve the church, and so I was able to jump right in at the church that I served at on their staff, and it was really great. Throughout that time, I've been able to work with kids in the worship space, but also just in general, like coordinating VBSs and things like that.
Yeah.
So I did that for several years and then ended my ministry journey in church operations. So doing a lot of facilities management, coordinating events, and things like that. But still staying and serving on the worship team in a different way. And so music is very near and dear to my heart. I'm glad that I was able to use those gifts in that way. So yeah, and I think I've had the privilege of experiencing ministry from several different perspectives. And, one of
Sure.
those roles, or one of those things that they all have in common is that ministry is fueled by generosity. That's kind of been
mm,
the common theme
Mm,
of of my journey in, working in ministry, but also, being a staff member or a yeah, I used to be a staff member and now I'm a church member and I get to serve in my church in a different capacity. That has been the theme of just what I've seen in my experience. And so every event, every outreach, every volunteer training, every child hearing the gospel, faithful giving made that possible. And so now at Ministry Brands, I have the privilege of helping churches remove friction so they can spend less time
yeah.
managing systems and more time making disciples and actually doing
mm,
ministry. So that's kind of how I got here today.
love it.
I love that. I love hearing about your journey some and just kind of coming off of that story and hearing some of your journey, how would you, really quickly, how would you say that those experiences have shaped the way that you think about, generosity and using technology, for example, all of these things with the local church?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've sat on both sides of the curtain, for lack of a better analogy, as a
Yeah,
staff member and also as a regular church member and attender. And I feel like it's helped me to understand that generosity isn't just about transactions. It's
Mm,
about trust.
yeah.
It's about vision. It's about helping people participate in what God is doing. And
yeah.
so it's a really sweet and special act of worship in that way.
I love that. Well, we use the phrase giving campaign at the top of the episode. And when church leaders hear that phrase sometimes, they may immediately think about the fundraising or asking people for money. I'd love to hear from you. How would you define a healthy church giving campaign? And what makes that different than, just your normal offering or a normal fundraiser?
Yeah, yeah. I think a fundraiser says we need money, right? And a healthy giving campaign,
That's
I
fair.
mean, it's true. We all need money.
Yeah.
A healthy giving campaign says, here's what God's inviting us to accomplish together.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
it's less of an ask, even though the ask is implied, the ask is there, and we make actual asks of
Yeah.
people to join us in this season of giving. However, It is more so an invitation into what God is doing. So the
Mm,
difference there is the focus. So they're not necessarily
Yeah.
centered on the church's financial need, although we don't discredit that, but they're centered on ministry impact. We
yeah,
invite people into
Yeah.
the mission
It's good.
rather than pressuring them to meet a budget.
that's so good. And I totally agree with you.
Thanks, girl.
Well, it makes me think about, the different reasons that a church may do a giving campaign, may have it. And,
Mhm.
we mentioned a couple different ones.
Mm,
But, I love what you said that a successful giving campaign, begins with a compelling reason. It's got something behind it, something that's mission focused. So, I mean, I'm thinking before a ministry leader who's listening to this, before they go and they set like a financial goal, or they go and they start creating like promotional or promo materials for this, or I don't know how it is for the churches that y'all have been a part of, but I feel like every giving campaign has had like a clever name at our
Yes.
church. Like we always come up with like a fancy name for it.
Yes. Mhm.
Before you come up with any of those things, what questions do you feel like that these ministry leaders should answer before they go into that?
Yeah, I think it's important to answer a couple of questions for yourself, but also with your team, and invite your team into this season of just ideas and thinking through this as a staff, as a team. The first question is just, what do you want to accomplish? And then
Yeah,
zero in on your why. So,
mm,
why does
yeah,
this matter? Why does it matter now? And then how does this support the mission that God has already called us to?
yeah, that's
And
good.
so once those answers are clear, I feel like the financial goal becomes the result and
Mhm,
not the purpose.
mhm.
yeah.
Okay, so
And
you
then you
said
can go and create a super cute name that's really clever and a really cute graphic. But maybe
yeah,
start with the why first before you get
I
yeah.
super
think
cute.
that's probably a good order. Yeah,
So you basically said, "Why this? Why now? And how does this support the mission God has already called us to?"
Yeah.
I think that third one is really critical, right? Because there's always going to be needs across every
yeah,
church. So how do you hone in on, like, one thing? How do we decide, do we need to make our lobby larger? Do we need to invest in our kids ministry and get a new playground? There's always going to be needs, and so I think
yes,
that's a really good way also to filter through your needs, and,
Yeah.
obviously, you should be praying. I mean, I feel like that goes without saying, but you should definitely be praying for guidance on, direction
yeah,
there, but if it does align to your overall mission, that should be kind of the number one box that you're checking to make sure, like, should we even be considering this? Does
Yeah.
it align to this greater purpose, this greater mission?
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now we move forward to the next, maybe pros and cons, or however you're weighing those options. But I think that's a great question to include, really, right there at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's good to start with the why. It's good to start on like, why you want to do this. And I've even heard it say that, like at the end of each year, like you should always have an end of year giving campaign. But sometimes it is very helpful just to hit the pause button and say like, okay, well, if we are going to do this, if we are going to be making that ask of our people who are in the seats, what is the exact purpose that we're going to have? And I feel like that is really your time. Jess, you mentioned end of the year. It's like, okay, this is airing in the summer of 2026. In 2027, what are we really believing God to do in
Yeah. Yeah.
2027? What are we going to need from financially to be able to move and take some of those challenges that we really feel like He's calling us to do in
Mhm.
the year ahead? And it's really, if you can start there, and you mentioned prayer, that's super important, right? Like really genuinely praying. And some people will make this a retreat, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of people will take that sabbatical time, maybe during the summer, and really be seeking God for
Yeah.
vision for what's next. But even beyond end of the year, different times, I'm connected to a church in our area that they are building a massive expansion. And that if you really were to ask them, you hear them talk about it. This pastor lights up at the idea that they get to build a new space to be able to accommodate all the way from babies to teenagers in that space, and they're really gonna be able to lean it. But to hear them, almost like comes alive
Mm.
being able to talk about that, and I feel like that's that piece beyond a clever name, and I love the names, I love the creative stuff. You'll learn that about me, Kristen.
Yep.
I love the creative
Love it.
things, but beyond the name, beyond the graphics, beyond the videos and all those different things, the websites and all those are important. But having that vision for something and believing for it, that's what I feel like is what is gonna set you up for success.
Mm.
What do you think
Mhm.
about that, Kristen?
I think you're so right. I think that if your why is solid and rooted in your mission, I just think that people buy into that. They get excited about
Mhm.
that. It's something
Mhm.
that, if it aligns with your mission and your values that you already have as a church, then come on, let's go. Like that I would get excited
Yeah.
about, something. I'm excited to
Yeah.
pray with you about this. I'm excited to giddy up and go, you know? So I think it
Mhm.
also helps inviting people into something that they already believe in, that they're
Mm.
already supporting you through, which is
Mm.
why it's really helpful to take that time to align, to narrow down your why. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think the why now piece is like the little underrated nugget there. Like
Mhm.
Mm.
sometimes there's lots of things, like you said, Jess, earlier, there's lots of things we can do, lots of things we need to do.
Yeah.
Why now? What
Right.
makes sense right
Yeah.
now for us as a ministry? What's going on in our community, and how can
Yeah.
we meet a need? How does this align with our mission? How does this align with our values? I think that that really sets the tone, and it
Mm.
helps to
It's good.
create excitement, but also togetherness in your congregation um, throughout the campaign.
I love that. We also have a framework. I'm just going to plug this real quick and we can drop it in the show notes. But we have a tool, a resource that's completely free. It's
Mhm.
called the Compelling Vision Framework. So if you need a worksheet to literally work through to identify this or help you identify this, we'll drop that in the show notes. It's a little dated, but I'm just
Yes.
going to be totally transparent. It's been around for a minute, but it still works and it's still a fantastic resource. So
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and drop that in the show notes.
That sounds great. And, Kristen, I'd love to hear from you. How can churches connect that financial goal that we're talking about? And so, whatever that amount may be to the larger ministry vision, so that
Yeah.
people will understand, like, not just like what they're given specific to, but why it matters.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to aligning that campaign with your mission. So
Yeah.
people don't, give to budgets. I mean, they do, but they're more excited to give toward the mission that they believe in, toward life change, toward overall kingdom impact. So I think instead of just saying we're raising $250,000 for a new building, what does $250,000 mean? Maybe
Mm.
it
Yeah.
launches another campus so that the gospel can be heard in, an
Yeah.
area of the
It's good.
community that you guys aren't as present in. Maybe it
Yeah,
allows more children to attend camp so that they can hear the gospel for the very first time. Maybe
yeah,
it funds food insecurity programs so that you can meet a need in the community and just show a little bit of Jesus to your
yeah,
community. The dollars are important because you can't do much without dollars, right? Without you can't do
Yeah.
certain things without funding, but the ministry impact, I think, is what inspires generosity. So connecting the why to the what is really important. And I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. I know I keep saying that, but the why is so important because it just makes the what even more special.
well, and
It's good.
I'll kinda double down on this. The why is critical, we've established that, but
Mhm.
how you communicate your why is also a very
Yes.
important piece, right? And
Okay. Tell us what you mean, Jess.
well, Kristen's saying it right now, right? So you can communicate your why one time, that's fine, but everybody loves like a use case. Like, give me an example, right? And so I think
Mhm.
I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about transparency, so I'm not going to dive in there right now. But I think understanding too, like, instead of giving them sticker shock, let's lead up with like the
Yeah.
broader mission, purpose, why. Here's the dollar amount. Here's why that dollar amount might feel high, aggressive, I don't know. Maybe we
Yeah.
don't even
Sure.
decide on that, but I think if you go the extra mile to put yourself in your congregation's shoes to say, "They haven't been with us in a boardroom praying about this for months." this is the
That's
first
right.
time they may be hearing that number, and it may come a little bit as a shock or, without the context and understanding. And so I think there's a way to make sure that you're communicating your why very clearly and then also helping bridge the gap between here's the why, here's what it costs,
Yeah.
somewhere in there, and again, we'll dig into transparency.
Well,
I think that's the answer.
there's so much good stuff here, and I'm thinking about these pastors who, many ministry leaders, they struggle with even the idea of talking about money. It
Yep.
can feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable for them to bring up money, and I'd love to hear your recommendation on that, Kristen. But if I
Yeah.
can just right out of the gate, just start by saying, like it does come back to the why, but just you calling out, it's how you tell about that why, how
Mm.
you communicate it. I feel like that's like half the battle, right?
Yeah.
Because explaining it to people and making it real, really giving them the handlebars on it so that they can grasp what that is and why we're doing this and why it's important in our church. Um, it's I feel like that's something that if you're really going to lean into people giving to your ministry, you've got to be able to clearly articulate that for them and make it make sense. Put it in something that makes sense to them and
Yes.
is
Yeah.
real to them and something that they care about.
Mm.
Because to your point, Jess, just because they're not going to have spent the time in prayer that your ministry leader has, they're not going to be the ones that have sat around the table and
Yeah.
really made those plans. You've got to explain those things and translate it to them.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, Kristen, tell us about do you have a great way that we can overcome the feeling uncomfortable for these ministry leaders about talking about money?
Well, I think you need to practice, but also put it into practice. So, if the only time a church mentions giving is during a campaign, it can feel a little uncomfortable, right? But when
Yeah.
generosity is regularly taught as an act of worship, those conversations become much healthier, much
Mm.
more natural. I think leaders might worry, people will think that they only care about the money and they're only interested in money, but Scripture talks about generosity often because
Mm.
generosity shapes our hearts. So I
Yeah.
It's
think
good.
the key is to weave that into your culture, make
Mm.
that a part of discipleship in your church so that it's
It's
not
good.
just seen as a series of financial transactions. It's actually a deep part of your culture as a ministry.
Mm. I love
Yeah. Jess, this is a word that you brought up when it comes to generosity and giving so often. What role would you say, Kristen, that transparency plays in, having that trust, building that trust with people as you're
that.
Mm.
asking them to give to a giving campaign?
I think it's huge. I think if you are asking your church to trust you with allocating the funds that they've entrusted to you, I think it's important to trust your congregation to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
And the
Mm,
biggest way to do that is transparency. Trust grows when communication is consistent. And so people want to know, where are
Mm.
we now? What are we doing? What's already been
yeah.
accomplished? What's still ahead? And so that transparency isn't just about here's my success numbers or this is going really well. Yay, yay, yay. It's
Right.
about showing and modeling faithful stewardship. And so I
Yes.
think
Mm,
it's a really important relationship between church leadership and church members. That
Mhm.
transparency really creates a trust there that's important, and it's just important to, be vulnerable and make sure that you have people holding you accountable. I
Mhm.
think that's really important, and that's a great way to just show that you care about your congregation in that way.
Yeah, you said model stewardship, and I think this is one piece that's really, really often overlooked. We have an
Mhm,
expectation from the congregation that they will be good stewards,
mhm.
but there's also a huge responsibility as a ministry to model that stewardship. I think that's a critical piece. I also want to give one example of a cool way to kind of pull communication and transparency together as well as like grabbing some or building momentum with your congregation.
yeah.
So my church did a large campaign last year, a capital campaign. It was an expansion campaign for a few of their locations. And so it was a larger number respect
Yeah.
to each location. And it was probably one of the most aggressive campaigns that they've done. And so, one of the things that I appreciated so much is there was a dinner hosted for members of the church who have given regularly. I think it was, I don't know what the number was, what the timeline was, but it was an invitation to see what the church had been praying about and what God had revealed as next steps. So that dinner, obviously they fed us, it was wonderful, and then our lead pastors from each of the locations came and shared what would happen. They had renderings, and they did have line item budgets, which
Mhm.
was a lot of information. And the reason I'm even proposing this as an idea is in some denominations, um, business items like this are not recommended to be shared outside of members if you have a membership. So our church doesn't have a technical membership, but they really kind of did this with people who gave regularly, that they knew,
Right.
everybody.
Do you remember what they called that time together, Jess? Because,
Um, I think it
I
was
was
like a
just talking
vision
with someone about this.
casting, something
Yeah,
similar
yeah,
to
yeah.
that. And so it was really, really cool to be a part of that conversation. And at the
Mhm.
end, they did give an option. If anyone has questions or concerns, please come talk to our team. We'd love to answer. We'd want to be transparent. I mean, that was the heart behind it. And it was very, very cool. They even showed us like different quotes that they had gotten and why they chose the companies that they did. I mean, it was a crazy level of transparency. And so, n- not only did that build trust, right, with the people who were
Mhm.
already giving consistently, but what that does too is it
Yep.
makes your vision contagious. So
Well,
those folks that were there were leading in a capacity, whether they knew it or not, just by being generous. And then beyond that, it was like when Sunday came where this was announced to the broader congregation, there was some people sitting there that had been already praying about this for a couple of weeks and were able to
Right.
help kind
Right.
of communicate and build excitement with the
Yes.
rest of the members. So I thought this was modeled really well. And if it's helpful, use this idea. It wouldn't really, I don't think, cost too much to just gather your most consistent givers. If nothing else, provide this to them via email, or you could do a virtual meeting of some capacity.
yeah,
But I thought that it was a really cool way to be transparent, cast a vision,
Yeah.
build excitement and momentum.
It's really fun to hear the ideas like that because, well, the journey I've been a part of a church plan for 12 plus years. Any church planner who may be listening today, you know that church planning is basically all you do, especially in the beginning, is fundraising. It is fundraising to the max. It is giving campaigns to the max, because you're trying to get this thing off the ground. And so I feel like, every creative idea that I feel like, you could think of, we have tried in some capacity as we were getting this launched off the ground now over a decade in.
Mm,
Being able to shift into some of those more regular giving campaigns is so helpful. But the exact idea that you just shared, Jess, that is something that, recently came to us. But yeah, whether that may be, launching a new campus,
mm,
expanding a building, and maybe going into a new area, whatever it may be. Yeah, that's so good. But back to the transparency, you mentioned the simple idea of just showing line by line what that, say it's $25,000, what that $25,000
mm,
goes down into. What exactly will we be using for this? And so,
mm,
as you do that, and then here's the kicker: you have to later come back, and you have to being able to say like, "Hey, this is what was given. This is how we were able to use it,"
yeah.
and showing that you were faithful stewards of the money that was given. And
Mm,
anyone who worked on any kind of project knows that things are going to shift a little bit. Things are going to be a little, they aren't going to be as black and white and clear as everything that you plan. However, being able to go back and say, this is what we were able to accomplish because of your giving,
mm,
that is what builds that trust for the next time that you
yeah.
go back and ask, right? Being able to show that level of transparency.
yeah,
And I'm thinking about this too, like on a Sunday morning where you've got new guests and new visitors. Is this something you want to dig into at that granular level on a regular basis on a Sunday morning? Maybe not, but what you could do is have a landing page with those details updated
That's it.
regularly and just drop a QR code and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing. And I mean, we've got giving forms and you can literally put links in the giving form. So you could even do it that way.
That's
Like,
right.
click here to give to this campaign. If you want more information or details on what your dollars are doing, click this link to learn more. Then you've got a landing page where you've got your vision, you've got your transparency. I think there's ways
That's
to do
right.
this that you're not sitting there talking about budget numbers every Sunday morning, right?
Well, Kristen, I think about like the all of the elements that Jess just mentioned. You want to be able to display those. There's probably other elements like timeline. There's the elements that are like exactly what this is going to go to. How would you suggest? Like is it something that you should be preparing for? What should the communication look like for something like this when you're planning your giving campaign?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. There's a lot that goes into it, and so I think for for the congregant, it's nice to, as far as communication goes, think of it in phases. So phase 1,
Mm,
I'm casting vision. Phase
Mm,
2, I'm educating. 3, I'm inviting people to participate, and then 4, we're gonna celebrate milestones and keep you
yes.
updated, and then 5, continue to share that impact. Instead of repeating the same announcement every week, you could keep answering a different question to those end each week. So, like,
Mm,
why, what, how, share some stories, here's some progress, here's a celebration.
yeah.
The message is consistent without being too overwhelming. And you're not just, I'm sure you could write a whole speech or sermon on the update each week, but that's not gonna land as well as those kind of,
Yeah.
drip, drip, drip of those pieces of information, and
It's
it
good
helps to build
wisdom.
excitement around it.
Yeah, yeah, because and I even think about, just you mentioned that landing page, like being able to refer people to them. So, as Kristen, as
Mhm.
you said, give them a story, give them a fresh take, a snippet of what the update could be, or just why it's important, or a story that's come up along the journey of the giving campaign. But then referring them back to even putting a slide up as you're talking about it. So if they want to go and explore more later when they're not in the moment of the service or that kind of thing, so that they can continue to give, or right there, give a link to that on the giving form, on your giving page to be
Yeah,
able to find out more. That's good though. I feel like those stories go a long way. What do you think?
I agree, and I think stories, they create an emotional connection, they make it personal, so numbers can tell you what happened, and listen, I'm a big nerd and I love numbers and Excel spreadsheets, but, like, stories help you to feel why it mattered. It helps you to feel the
Mhm.
why and to
yeah.
see the why behind the what, right? And so one testimony, about a family finding hope because of the generosity fueled efforts of your ministry, it
Yeah.
communicates more than a pie chart ever could, right? Like, and I love a good
Yeah.
pie chart, don't get me wrong, no shade to pie chart. But that testimony is why you did what you did. The
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
stories are authentic, they're specific, and they're focused on God's work and not the
Mm.
church's accomplishments. So
Oof.
Good.
that's something to keep in mind as well. This isn't about, I'm just gonna boast in what the church has done, the church's efforts. Yes, you put a
Yeah.
lot of effort into this, but God made that happen, and so focusing on God's
Mhm.
work instead of the church's accomplishments, that just reiterates your why.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
And
good.
you can't brag on God too much.
Right.
That's the thing. That's the thing that
Yeah,
I love is like you can tell of his goodness all day long, and and I don't think anyone's gonna get upset about that. I think that that's something that you can always point to. Whereas we don't want to talk about our accomplishments all day long, right? And we got to give credit where credit is due,
Mhm.
for what God is doing in these churches, and so that's
mhm.
amazing. Thinking about the stories and the different elements, whether it be updates or whatever it may be, what communication channels quickly would you recommend for church leaders to give updates about these campaigns?
Um, all of them. I feel like
That's
it's
fair.
pe people consume information so differently, and so just picking
Mm,
one avenue, you're gonna limit your audience to the people that prefer to communicate or to check that audience. So
yeah,
some people watch announcements. Some people might travel and can't be in Sunday service very frequently, but they're still active
that's good.
members of the church that give regularly. Some people like email, some people are on social media, some use the church app. I use every avenue at your disposal in
Yeah.
order to get the message across so that you don't rely on one channel. Technology kind of
Mm.
helps churches coordinate those touch points so that people can hear a consistent message no matter where they engage, and you're meeting people where they're at.
It's good.
Mm. It's a good word. Well, it makes me think about, that you mentioned the technology and, those kinda
Mhm.
elements, and I think about when people go to give, whether it be on, the website or, scanning a QR code or, a tap tag, whatever it may be, but it also going beyond just in the moment giving. Something that we talk about a lot on the show is recurring giving. Every time we're talking about these giving campaigns and those elements, recurring giving comes up. How do you feel like that plays into a giving campaign?
Oh man, I love talking about recurring giving. I could geek out about this all day, but I'll keep it brief, so you don't have to edit too much out later. I like to describe recurring giving as removing obstacles to generosity. Life gets busy. Automating
Yeah.
generosity is about becoming it's not about becoming less intentional, it's about helping you prioritize and stay aligned with your intentions. And
Mm.
so just like, we automate bills or, my Netflix comes out automatically every month. Recurring
Yeah.
giving can become a practical rhythm of faithful stewardship. And I think this is where the church can step in to with updates and intentional communications to those recurring donors to combat passive
Yes.
generosity,
Right.
because we don't want this to be just a set it and forget it kind of thing. They are
Yeah.
still actively giving toward your ministry. And
Mm.
so being intentional with the communication. Jess, I love how you mentioned that those dinners were inviting, your regular givers, being
Yeah.
intentional with your recurring giver communications, reminding them what their generosity is fueling in your ministry. I think that's really important, and it helps to combat that passive generosity, because let me tell you, there's so many subscriptions that I forgot I signed up for, and that is some passive just subscription payments coming out of my checking account. My poor husband, helps me find them occasionally. But, I think that intentional communication is key
Yeah.
to keep it active, to keep them active and
Mm.
excited about
Mm.
their generosity.
Well,
Mm.
and I'll piggyback off of that and just say that, like, it's a good practice when people are actively giving to your ministry, whether it's to a campaign or just regularly, to make sure that we're expressing gratitude, that we're letting people know that like you are making a difference, that that there is a mission that is able to happen because of your faithfulness and giving in this way.
Mm.
And so you mentioned a couple different things, but like whether it be from the stage, like telling them how much of a difference their giving is making. It may be by an email. So sure, there's some technology where you can respond right away and let them know, like, hey, this is making a difference in this way, and you can include stories and you can, do that. But even regular updates, social media. But thank you for giving to this cause because
Mm.
of your giving, we were able to do this. And so I feel like that's something that is good to build in. And because on the other side, for the person who is giving, you don't always know as a ministry leader how much of a sacrifice went into that gift when they were faithful
Mm.
to it.
Mhm.
And so like just reminding them that hey, like this is important. Like you did an amazing thing when you did this.
Yeah.
Have you got any recommendations for that?
What this is kind of bringing to mind is, what happens after someone gives, right? This is where many churches accidentally stop. And so being intentional with communication, not just throughout, but
Yeah.
after as
Mm.
well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the gift isn't the finish line, and
Hmm.
it's the beginning of a deeper relationship. So,
That's
I
good.
just think that communication again is key.
Mm.
Um, is key there because people want to know that they're a part of something meaningful.
Mm.
And so what could be more meaningful than, you know, kingdom work?
Mm.
Mm.
That's
That's
good.
really good.
You can, customize a lot of like, for recurring giving, or another really great function if your giving software supports this. Ministry Brands definitely does, but pledges are a great option for giving
Mhm.
campaigns. A little
Yes.
different, right? Recurring giving is you setting an amount and that is given at the frequency that you want. And so that's awesome. That's kind of like evergreen, if you would. That's a marketing term, but that's like all the time. You can do that all the time.
Right.
Your tithes, offerings, whatever your regular consistent giving is. But pledge is another option when it comes to a campaign. And it is, if you're not familiar with pledges, but it's essentially when someone commits to a total amount over time. So our system has a way for them to choose that total amount, and then it allows them to break it down either weekly, monthly, or annually so that they can contribute as much as they feel comfortable over the course of time. And it's
Yes.
kind of like this cool calculator. So if they're like,
Yes.
"Oh, I think we can give about 1,000." And then once they kinda see that broken out, they're like, "Whoa, actually, we can afford more than that monthly. What if we upped our gift?" So, this is a really cool feature and function, and with those particular forms, you can send a thank you email. Um,
Yeah.
that is a little bit
Yes.
more targeted, right? So if
Yes.
you are pulling a pledge specific to your campaign, whatever that might be, you can tailor those communications a little bit better, especially for their first gift. And then beyond that, I think it kind of switches over to the recurring giving, and you can still customize those as well. But
Yeah.
keep in mind that you don't. Yes, it is highly encouraged that you engage outside of your software with those donors, whether you're sending emails through your CHMS or whatever else.
That's
Make
right.
sure that they are identified, small grouped, and communicated with on a regular basis. But even within your giving platform, it's pretty easy to just set those emails and forget them on the operating side, right? And so
Yes.
as you're thinking through this campaign, be sure to include some really thoughtful, prayerful language around especially a first gift. That's really, really important. And so think through all of your operations, and this is why it's great to pull your team in on this, and not be operating in a vacuum because someone's aware of that functionality in your tools, and they can help align the communication even within those tools to help that compelling vision all the way through
Yes.
the process.
That's good advice. I think about the church leaders who may be on the other side of this, Kristen, and they may be thinking about a giving campaign. They may be thinking about what their next giving campaign is going to be. I'd love to hear just what is one practical step that you feel like they could take from this episode as they are planning their next time that they're going to be doing a campaign like this.
So I think Jess mentioned it earlier, and I think you said you're gonna link it in the show notes. Check out that compelling vision framework worksheet. It
Mm,
helps to kind of organize your thoughts, and
Mm,
it will
yeah.
also help you answer the three questions that I mentioned earlier, like why are you doing this? Why now? And how does this support the mission we've already been called to? Because I actually use that framework to create those questions. So it's going to go hand in hand. Look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
mm.
Um, and so I
That's
would just
perfect.
sit with that. It's practical, it's easy, it's just a Word doc, nothing crazy. And yeah, just pray through that worksheet and see what happens.
Mm.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one of the big themes of our podcast is healthy churches and healthy leaders. And I'd love to hear, in your opinion, what would you say is one essential component of a healthy church?
I think healthy churches create disciples and not just attendees. And so
Mm.
Mm,
programs, they're important. Technology is important. Giving is important. But all of those should ultimately point people toward a deeper relationship with Christ and one another. And so
Mm.
I think discipleship and being intentional with discipleship in your church is a really, really healthy thing to do.
that's a good word today. Well, Kristen, the way that we love to wrap things up is with a final five rapid fire round of questions. Are you up for the challenge?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, this
Awesome.
first
Let's
one,
do it.
I think you're gonna have an answer. Look at all your books, girl. Okay, what's one book on this subject or similar you'd recommend to church leaders?
So it's not directly related to this subject, but I think it can be used while you're thinking through giving campaigns. The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. It's about how, like, why certain experiences become unforgettable and then
Mm.
most fade from memory. So they kind of talks about how extraordinary moments don't just happen by chance, they can be intentionally created. And so I think creating moments that are memorable and make people feel valued throughout a giving campaign, recognizing someone for their generosity, telling stories, I think that that kind of plays a part in that. So it's a really good read. I read it for the first time years ago when I was on staff at a church, and it's stuck with me.
Mm.
And so I do read a lot, and they usually kinda go I read really fast, and then I forgot what I just finished reading. So that one has actually stuck with me and my ADHD, so I think it's a good one.
That's good. Okay. What's the last thing you listened to on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you stream music?
So I bounce around between a lot of different genres, but the last thing I listened to would be a playlist of film scores. If I didn't study voice in school, I wanted to major in composition and be a film score
Wow.
composer.
Oh,
So,
that's
Okay.
so
I have
cool.
a playlist that I listen to at work, that helps me focus, and, it's got a lot of good scores on there. I love movie music. Love it.
That's so fun.
This will show my ADHD with that. Well, I cannot put that on. I love listening to it. I can't put it on unless I already know, like, okay, it's gonna be from this movie because I sit there every time a new episode or a new song comes on, I'm like, what movie is that? And I end
Oh,
up
that's
just
so
going back
fair.
to Spotify
You're
20
playing
times, you
Name
know?
That Tune with your
Yeah, exactly. So I'm
Um,
like, okay, I need the Lord of the Rings soundtrack right now,
yes,
and
so
that
that
way I don't
you're
have to keep
aware.
guessing. But
That's a
I
good
No,
feel you
that's a
on
good
that,
one.
Kristen. That is good. Yeah.
Okay, number 3, what is your favorite piece of technology or software right now?
So, I love a good app. I love a good app. I have 2 favorites right now. My professional and relevant favorite right now is actually my church app because I can register for events, see what's going on. It's really great. I use it, like, once a week at least.
Nice.
My
Nice.
personal favorite app right now, is an app that helps me keep track of my cross stitch projects and creates patterns from pictures that I upload to it. So, I love a good app. I love a good app,
Very
That
and I
cool.
just wanted to make
I
sure I
love that
got a
you're leveraging technology for such a non-technological activity.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, dude, it keeps track of, like, what row I'm on, what square I'm on, it helps me keep track of the threads that I need to buy,
Whoa.
yeah, I'm in my old lady craft era. Oh, I don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
we've gotta know, do you know the name of the app? What's the app?
it's called Stitchly.
Okay. So
Stitchly.
somebody's gonna be on
There
the other side of this, and they're gonna be like, "Yeah, I need that app for my
Yeah.
Yeah,
cross
and then we
stitching."
can become best friends. So,
I
but
love
there
There you
are
go.
in-app purchases. I feel like I should disclaimer. I feel like an infomercial.
Maybe you get an affiliate link, Kristen, and we'll drop that in the show notes.
There you
Oh
go,
my
there you go.
gosh, so fancy.
Okay, quote or advice that has stuck with you over the years.
So it's actually from the book The Power of Moments. And so it says, I wrote it down. Transitions should be marked, milestones commemorated, and pits filled. That's the essence of thinking in moments. And so
That's
I just thought it was a really profound framework for caring for people through celebrations, through
Mm,
change, through hardship, and that applies to both ministry and just life in general.
yeah.
So that has stuck with me. It's a quote that I think about often as I lead my team at work. Just want to make sure everyone feels valued in all that they do.
Mm, I love that.
that's great.
Okay, last one. What is one thing you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
So, one thing that I'm especially passionate about is encouraging church leaders to care for themselves as intentionally as they care for others.
Mm,
And I
Mm,
think ministry is deeply meaningful work, but it can also be like emotionally and mentally and spiritually draining. So I believe that healthy leaders build healthy ministries. And
wow,
so prioritizing your own well being, it's not selfish, it's actually
mhm,
essential for long term and sustainable impact. And so my hope is
wow,
that, I'm able to remind leaders, that taking care of your mental health, actually allows you to lead with greater joy and
mhm,
wisdom, resilience, authenticity, all that good stuff, so that you can continue serving the people that God has called you, to love and to shepherd. So, big mental health advocate over here, but it's not selfish to take care of yourself. Healthy
Mm,
healthy leaders, build healthy ministries.
so good.
It's good. Kristen, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you sharing, these frameworks and the wisdom with us today. I know that people are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to stay connected with your work. What's the best way for them to keep up with you?
So yeah, maybe LinkedIn. My LinkedIn and my social media is really boring. But you can follow me on I'm on Instagram. I think my account is private. Sorry. And but LinkedIn is where it's at. But if you want some good, I actually made a note of some other cooler people that if you want to follow them, about autism awareness, and they have some
Mm,
really good content. Project Hope Foundation is a really good one. Um,
Mm.
Make It Clean underscore mom. Precious Rogers is a content creator. Her son has autism and she's a believer. And then Tanner with Autism. You might know him from Love on the Spectrum. Those are some great follows and they just bring joy
mm.
to me and my family that follows them. And so follow them before you follow me. They're much more fun and have much better content than I do.
Mm.
Well, I think maybe you don't give yourself enough credit. I think you've shared some great stuff today and definitely appreciate all those things. We'll link up all these links. And I just, again, want to say thank you for joining us. And we appreciate all you do at Ministry Brands and for helping all these churches.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, for all of our listeners that are out there, we want to thank you for listening along today. Be sure to check out all the show notes. We'll link up all of the things that we've talked through today. And if this episode has encouraged you, if you've gotten any nuggets of wisdom or any things in this that have been helpful to you, would you consider sharing it with a friend? Helping us spread the word is one of the kindest things that you can do for our show. We put in a lot of work to make all of this happen, and we would love to be able to get it to more and more church leaders to help them, just like we're trying to help you today. And so, again, hit that follow button. We want to make sure that you're subscribed, share it with a friend, help us get the word out. And until next time, keep leading well right there in your community, and we'll see you right back here next time on Church Leadership Lab.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.